Living longer, living healthier, living better than ever before. Welcome to Mountain Pacific's Healthy Living for Life, a weekly series that gives you the information, education, and expert insight you need to become an active participant in today's ever-changing healthcare climate. Here now is today's program host.
Have you talked with your loved ones and your doctor about what you want for your end-of-life care? It's not an easy conversation to have, but it's an important one to make sure your wishes are known. But first, you have to know your options. What are the different possibilities when it comes to getting the end-of-life care you want? That's what we'll be talking about on today's episode of Healthy Living for Life, a show dedicated to helping you do just that. I'm your host, Beth Brown. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Joining me today is Dawn Port, who is going to talk with us about some end-of-life care options. Dawn, thanks so much for being here again.
Yes,
you came here before, but we just realized this was a huge topic. It needed more time, so we appreciate you giving us that time.
You bet.
So can we start out by talking about hospice and palliative care? A lot of people think those are the same. I was one of them, but they're different, right?
They are different in one major way. Palliative care can start at any time during a disease process. So if someone is diagnosed with, say, heart failure or lung disease or cancer, when they get that diagnosis, we could potentially come in with palliative care, look at what's important to them, how can we help them maintain their quality of life while they're getting treatments, actively seeking treatment for whatever disease process they're living with. And that can actually go on for, maybe 2 or 3 years even. Okay. But the major difference between palliative care and hospice is that hospice really is focused on those last few months of an individual's life. So both palliative care and hospice look at what symptoms the individual is living with. How can we help with those symptoms? We look at what are the psychosocial issues that they might be living with. Say they need, special equipment in their home, or they have some financial concerns of receiving care or being able to remain in their own home. Do we need to look at different housing? Are there some spiritual issues that we need to address? So we really look at the whole individual. What are the barriers? How can we help overcome those? How can we maintain a quality of life for people? Okay. So both hospice and palliative care do that piece of it.
Okay, so whether it's palliative care or hospice care, and palliative care, as you said, can last much longer than hospice, how do those types of care get paid for?
Oh, good question. So both palliative care and hospice can be paid for through insurance. I would suggest to people that they really look at their policies, though, and talk with a representative at their insurance company about palliative care. Okay. Palliative care is a relatively new kind of concept. And we're working, especially in Montana, looking at talking with insurers. How can we pay for palliative care? What are the things that we need to be looking at? In hospice, is definitely paid for by a variety of insurance programs: Medicare, Medicaid, Blue Cross Blue Shield, TRICARE, all of those things. Okay. Now, there may be some co-pays with that an individual has to pay, but generally hospices will pick that up for the individual. Also, if a person is a veteran, the VA will pay for hospice care 100% of the time. Yeah.
Okay, and so where does this care usually happen?
Anywhere that an individual calls what their home is. So we can go into assisted living facilities, both with palliative care and with hospice care. There are some programs in Montana, especially in the bigger communities where the hospice has a palliative care, or excuse me, the hospital has a palliative care program, and they will go into an assisted living facility or they'll go into a community nursing home. And of course the individual's own home. So wherever an individual calls home, that's where we go. Yeah.
And are there special providers that give that care, or who provides that care to people?
Yeah. So for most palliative care teams in Montana that I'm aware of, it really is a team of individuals. So we can address all of those issues that I talked about earlier. So it can be a physician or a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant that will be the primary care person, or will consult with that individual's primary care provider. There may very well be a social worker, a pharmacist, a dietitian involved. So it really is a team effort. The same in hospice. The nice thing about hospice is they also can add some additional services where they will have a certified nursing assistant that can come in and help with bathing, along with all those other services.
Okay,
Yeah.
we're almost out of time this segment, but just really quickly, if someone has a pacemaker or some device like that, does that get shut off during hospice care?
Oh, that's a really good question. And the answer really is, it is an individual choice. I have known people that they would really like to have their, it's called an ICD, it's a defibrillator, an implantable defibrillator. They would really like to keep that on for a time. But then they might, because of their heart's disease, that defibrillator might start going off and they get shocked every once in a while to get their heart back in a regular rhythm. So they decide to have that turned off. Okay. So it really is an individual decision.
Okay, all right, thanks, Dawn. We do need to take a break, but when we come back, what do you really know about life-sustaining treatments, especially in the case of an emergency? We'll talk about your options and what they really mean when it comes to your health right after this. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking about end-of-life care options, and in the case of an emergency, there are times when a person's symptoms can result in death. But what are the life-sustaining treatments you need to consider in those cases? We're still talking with Dawn Port. Dawn, thanks for sticking with us. Yeah. So this is something that you did talk about last time, but it's certainly worth repeating because it's such important information.
Yes.
There are treatments that you can do that are life-sustaining in an emergency, but they can impact your quality of life, right? So can you talk a little bit about the benefits and the risks of some of those treatments?
Yes, you bet. And the first one I think that people are most familiar with certainly is cardiopulmonary resuscitation, or CPR, that is done when a person's heart stops. So in looking at the risks and benefits of that procedure, we really need to consider what the risks are and what the benefit for that individual is, and also looking at what are the chances of a person recovering if they have this procedure done. So we know statistically, if someone's heart stops out in the community, only 5% of those people survive that event. And the people that are most likely to survive are, a younger, otherwise healthy individual who will most likely survive that. And even within the hospital, if someone goes into a cardiac arrest in the hospital, only 15% of those individuals survive and are discharged from the hospital and have the quality of life that they want to have after that event. So some of the things that we think about and talk to people about when they're thinking about, do I want to have this done if I should have a cardiac arrest, is looking at what are the disease processes you're living with right now. Do you have a terminal illness that you will at some point die from anyway? Or are you living in a nursing home and have extra care needs? Or are you getting extra care at home? All of those things play into the conversation about the benefit of having this procedure done and the likelihood that you're going to survive that event. And so we look at, what are the risks? Well, we can, even in young, healthy people, we can break their ribs because the compressions are quite vigorous to try to get the heart restarted. We can puncture the lungs or even puncture the spleen. And so it is definitely not without risk, that procedure. And if someone is without oxygen for a prolonged period of time, even several minutes, there could be some brain injury from that, all the way from maybe some memory issues to coma. So it's really not something that we know someone's going to survive from. Yes, we're going to do this on everyone. We have to take those things into consideration. Sure. And we have to honor people's wishes as well. What is it that they would like to have done? And if we feel that we would not necessarily recommend CPR for someone that is terminally ill and maybe close to the end of their life, we wouldn't necessarily recommend that they have that done.
Okay.
But have that conversation about why, and let them make that decision, or their families make that decision.
And so CPR is one of the life-sustaining treatments. What are some of the others?
Another one that we talk about a lot is artificial nutrition or artificial fluids, artificial hydration. And in some cases, artificial nutrition and fluids make a lot of sense. If we think that someone is going to be recovering, they're just having specific surgery that it might affect their ability to swallow, or they may have had a stroke and we anticipate that they may at some point be able to swallow on their own again without complications, then that makes absolute sense. For individuals with other disease processes like multiple sclerosis or Lou Gehrig's disease, that's always a conversation to have with the individual. This may help sustain your life and it provide a better quality of life for you. So let's talk about doing that. For an individual who is at end stage with dementia, that may not be something that we want to do. So looking at that again. And artificial fluids may make sense, but in some cases it may add to fluid buildup in an individual's body that would cause them more suffering. So we have to talk about that. Another one would be dialysis, certainly, and looking at filtering out all the poisons from the body that the kidney's no longer able to do, and then of course using a ventilator in the case of an individual that is having a respiratory arrest. And there's a lot of risks to being on a ventilator, and it may or may not be successful.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Dawn. It is time for another break. But when you come back, hopefully you have a little better understanding about some of the options for end-of-life care. But now what? Find out how to talk about end-of-life care when we come back after these messages. Stay tuned. Thanks for staying with us. Today we've talked about the different end-of-life care options that need to be considered. Now let's talking about having the conversation about those options so your doctor and your loved ones can respect your wishes. Dawn, again, thanks for staying with us. So this is a tough topic to have, a conversation to talk about, because it makes us think about our death, and that's uncomfortable. But can you start out by talking about why it is so important to have this conversation, either with a loved one or your doctor or both?
Yes, it is a very important topic. And I think, the research shows us that people really do want to talk to their provider about that, but they either don't know how to bring it up, or they themselves feel uncomfortable bringing it up, so they end up not having that conversation. And so it's really important, if you have very specific ideas about what you would and wouldn't want to have happen if you should be in, a critical circumstance, that you do approach at least your provider and say, this is what I would and wouldn't want. And look at completing an advance directive, which not only names the individual that you would like to speak for you if you're not able to speak for yourself, but also gives your providers an idea of what you would and would not want as far as medical care if you were not able to speak for yourself. So an advance directive is really important, and anyone can fill these out if they're over 18 years old, but particularly it is important if you know you have a life-limiting illness. Put down your wishes so that we can honor those, because as providers, we don't want to do anything that you don't want to have done, and we do want to do things that you do want, if that is an ethical way of going about it. A pulse is another way of making your wishes known, and that is a provider's orders for life-sustaining treatment. And the difference between the advance directive and the pulse is that is an actual physician's order, where an advance directive is just you stating what your wishes are. And they may be overridden in some cases. If there is, if you say on that advance directive, I want this to be a general guideline, then it can potentially be overridden. A post is actually an order where the emergency medical technicians, if they come into your home and you're in a cardiac arrest, they can see that pulse that's there. They know that you have made the choice not to have life-sustaining treatments in those situations, and they will do everything they can up to that point to make you comfortable, but they won't do the CPR. So does that answer your question?
Yes, perfect. And you talked too about that most people want to have that conversation, and you're absolutely right. I actually have a statistic here that every 9 in 10 people agree that it's important to have the conversation, but only a third of us actually do it.
Right.
So it's probably tougher. Maybe you can talk to your doctor about it because they're your provider, but do you have some tips of talking to your loved ones or those people close to you that you do want to speak on your behalf? How do you even approach that subject?
Yes, and that is difficult. I had to do that with my mom when she was dying, and she actually came to me, but that doesn't always happen. So one of the things that I really like to use in my own practice is something called a values checklist. And what that does is it just gives people a way to open the conversation with the family. And I have one of them here, and let me just read just a couple of the questions here. So it says, most important of all to me when thinking about the end of life choices are, and some of the choices are physical comfort, maintaining my dignity, those kinds of things. And then another question says, what are some of the things that are important to you? The nature of care should not devastate my family, my religious beliefs and traditions to be returned to my homeland after I die, those kinds of things. So this is kind of an opener. Here, these are the things that are important to me. Can we talk about this?
That's great.
Another document that's really helpful is something called 5 Wishes. And you can find that and download that on the internet, or hospitals have those. That's another great way of writing those things down and then saying, here, these are the things that are important to me. Let's talk about this.
That's great.
Yeah.
And what if somebody doesn't have someone to talk to about that? What are their options?
Oh, yes. And that's more common than really we know. And so, first of all, it's really important to have that conversation with your provider. Have that conversation documented in the advance directive, and even have that advance directive on record at your clinic or in the hospital or with the Montana State Registry, and do the pulsed as well. So those choices are very clear, they're documented, they're in your medical record, and can be accessed in an emergency. If you don't have those documents available, then it is up to the hospitalist or the emergency room staff to look at what's going on and make a decision based on, ethics about what is in the best interest of this individual.
Perfect.
So,
thank you so much, Dawn. Super great
Yeah.
information. We appreciate your time.
Yeah.
And that's all the time we have today. We hope you'll talk with your loved ones and your healthcare providers about your end-of-life care and move forward with making your wishes known. Until next time, stay fit, stay well, and stay healthy for life with Healthy Living for Life. Have a great week.
Healthy Living for Life is brought to you by Mountain Pacific Quality Health. We'd love to hear from you. If you have suggestions for future programs, visit our website at mpqhf.org or call us at 406-443-4020. You can also catch us on YouTube by visiting our website and clicking on the YouTube icon. Special thanks to Fire Tower Coffee House and Roasters. Production facilities provided by Video Express Productions.